I came home from a 14-hour shift to find myself locked out in the freezing New England rain. My sister shouted through the heavy oak door, "Yeah, you pay the bills, but this family still doesn't accept you." I wiped the water from my face and replied, "Maybe the freezing rain will change your minds." I'm 32, a male senior lead technician servicing industrial HVAC systems across the greater Boston area. I pull $92,000 a year working in brutal conditions, managing heavy mechanical overhauls for massive manufacturing plants and food warehouses. For 5 years, my hard-earned money has been systematically drained by my family. My best friend, David, a straight-shooting diner owner with zero patience for BS, tells me I'm a financial Stockholm Syndrome victim. The only other creature who understands how messed up things are is my old golden retriever, Buster, who's been silently judging this train wreck for 3 years. This nightmare started in 2019. My parents were 3 months behind their mortgage, facing immediate foreclosure. To save them, I drained my savings, took a personal loan, liquidated my 401k with early penalties, and bought their classic 1920s heritage estate outright for $290,000. The deed is solely in my name for asset protection. They promised to pay me back gradually. In 5 years, they haven't given me a single dime. Instead, I've spent thousands out of pocket just to keep the roof over their heads. $4,500 annually in property taxes, $2,200 in insurance, a $14,000 historical slate roof restoration after a winter storm, and an $11,500 boiler replacement during a sub-zero blizzard. Because of this financial stranglehold, I've had to live in a cramped basement apartment miles away, driving a high-mileage work truck, while they live mortgage-free in a historic neighborhood that would cost at least $2,800 a month to rent. My parents, Marcus and Helena, both 55, act like faux aristocrats. Marcus claims his nerves are too shattered to hold a regular job, yet he spends 12 hours a day rebuilding vintage Swiss clocks in my garage. Helena works 15 hours a week as a luxury spa receptionist, spending more time gossiping than working, only to come home complaining about her exhausting career. Then there's my sister, Chloe, a professional dropout who has failed out of 2 colleges and quit 20 different jobs. She currently makes about $200 a month doing fake interior design consulting for her friends, while mooching my food, utilities, and streaming passwords. Worst of all is how they treat me. Chloe invites her upscale acquaintances over to my property, acting like she inherited the estate, while mocking me as the crude maintenance man who just funds the background bills. Helena spends my cash on expensive antique wall decor, then calls me low vibrational and unrefined when I question the expenses. Last year, she threw a massive tantrum when I flat out refused to fund a $20,000 marble bathroom renovation. They got comfortable treating me like a blue-collar servant, completely forgetting one crucial fact. I don't just help with the bills. I own the very dirt they're standing on. The breaking point came on their 30th wedding anniversary gala, and it changed everything. I had just pulled a brutal 14-hour emergency shift fixing a massive ammonia leak at a commercial cold storage plant. I was exhausted, soaked in sweat, and smelling faintly of industrial machine oil. But because I'm the idiot who actually cared, I stopped by an upscale market to pick up 3 cases of imported wine and the high-end catering platters that Chloe had demanded I fund for their grand celebration. I paid $1,200 for the food and alcohol alone. When I pulled up to my own property in my dented work truck, the driveway was lined with BMWs and Lexuses. The entire historic estate was glowing, classical music drifting out into the cold night. I walked up to the front entrance, my arms loaded with heavy boxes of their party supplies. Chloe opened the door, dressed in a vintage silk gown. The moment her eyes hit my faded high-visibility work jacket and muddy work boots, her face went completely blank. She didn't offer to help with the boxes. Instead, she stepped outside, pulling the heavy oak door shut behind her until it clicked. "What are you doing at the front door, Arthur?" she hissed, her voice dripping with disgust. "My design clients and Dad's friends from the country club are in the foyer. You look like a grease monkey. Go around to the carriage house or enter through the cellar door. You're going to ruin the entire atmosphere." I stared at her, my muscles aching from a double shift. "Chloe, I literally bought the wine and paid for the steaks they're eating inside. Let me through." "We don't need your blue-collar attitude ruining tonight," she snapped, her eyes dead and cold. She snatched the top box of wine from my arms, stepped back inside, and slammed the door in my face. The deadbolt slid into place. I stood there on the porch for 10 minutes, stunned, holding the remaining groceries in the freezing rain. Through the frosted glass of the dining room window, I could hear them laughing. I heard Marcus raising a toast, thanking everyone for celebrating their beautiful family heritage. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Chloe. "Don't take it personally, bro. Mom said we need boundaries and positive energy tonight. Your vibes just don't match the event. Maybe go find some friends your own age." Right after, I heard Marcus's loud, booming voice drift through the old window frame. "Maybe now the boy will learn that throwing money around doesn't make him the head of this household. He thinks he owns us just because he covers a few minor expenses." Chloe's voice followed, clear as a bell. "Honestly, it's pathetic. He's 32 and still trying to buy our respect with his overtime checks. Getting locked out might finally teach him some humility." Helena giggled in agreement. "He's always been so unrefined, trying to micromanage our lifestyle choices." The words hit me like a physical blow, but it wasn't sadness that washed over me. It was absolute blinding clarity. They didn't just lack gratitude, they actively loathed me for saving them. They despised the fact that a crude maintenance man was the only reason they weren't homeless. They would rather pretend I didn't exist than admit they were entirely dependent on me. Standing in the freezing rain, looking at the groceries in my hands, something flipped in my brain. I realized I didn't have to beg for love from people who viewed me as a utility bill. I legally owned the roof over their heads, the foundation beneath their feet, and the very air they were breathing. I threw the remaining grocery bags into the back of my truck and drove straight to David's diner. It was late, and the diner was closed to the public, but the lights were on. David and his dad, Frank, a retired ironworker with calloused hands and a spine of steel, were doing the nightly deep clean. When I walked in, soaked to the bone and looking like a ghost, David took one look at me, dropped his mop, and pulled out a chair. "Jesus, Arthur, you look like you just survived a cave-in. What did they do now?" I told them everything. I told them about the $1,200 catering, the door slammed in my face, and the conversation I overheard through the window. Frank slammed his fist onto the stainless steel counter so hard the napkin holders rattled. "In my day, if a son bought your house to save you from a sheriff's sale, you'd kiss the ground he walked on. Locking you out of your own property? That's not family, Arthur. That's a nest of parasites." David cracked open a cold beer, slid it across to me, and leaned in, his face dead serious. "No more excuses, man. You've played the martyr for 5 years. They want to play the 'this is our heritage estate' game? Show them the deed and watch their fake little world collapse, go full nuclear." Frank nodded in agreement. "My brother's kid, Lucas, is a savage real estate attorney downtown. He doesn't do mediation, Arthur. He does evictions. I'm calling him right now." As I sat in that warm diner, listening to real men who actually cared about my well-being, the last shred of guilt died inside me. It was time to remind Marcus, Helena, and Chloe exactly who held all the cards.
The next morning, I met Lucas at his downtown office. The space was filled with dark leather and heavy legal volumes, designed to intimidate. Lucas was sharp, clinical, and had a reputation for treating nightmare tenants like a bulldozer treats a sandcastle. He looked over my neat folder of property deeds, tax receipts, and maintenance bills. A predatory smile crossed his face. "They actually think they own this place because of vibes? This is going to be a bloodbath. How fast do you want them out?" 2 days later, the eviction paperwork was finalized, a formal notice to quit and demand for possession in big, bold block letters. It gave Marcus, Helena, and Chloe exactly 30 days to clear out or face a formal lawsuit and a sheriff-assisted removal. David insisted on driving me over to the estate to witness the Tong Dad. I wouldn't miss this for a Michelin star, he muttered, gripping the steering wheel. When we arrived, the timing couldn't have been more poetic. Chloe was hosting one of her exclusive design mixers in the formal living room. Through the high windows, I could see local high society women sipping tea out of porcelain cups that I had paid for. I walked up to the front door, accompanied by David and a stone-faced, uniform-wearing process server Lucas had hired. I rang the bell. Marcus opened it, wearing a silk smoking jacket, looking annoyed. His face drained of all color when he saw me standing next to an official-looking stranger holding a legal summons. "Richard Morrison?" the process server asked in a booming, professional voice. "You are being formally served with an eviction notice regarding this property." He thrust the documents into Marcus's trembling hands. "Service completed? Good luck." David stood behind me, biting his lip to keep from laughing out loud. Marcus stared at the paperwork, his chest heaving as he read the first few lines. "What the hell is this? Arthur, what kind of sick joke is this?" Hearing the commotion, Helena and Chloe rushed to the foyer, their wealthy guests watching curiously from the archway. Chloe snatched the papers from her father, her voice rising an octave into a screech. "This is fake! This is total BS! You can't evict us, Arthur! We inherit this house by blood! This is our family heritage!" "Check the county registry, Chloe," I said, my voice deadpan and steady. "My name has been the sole title on the deed for 5 years. You've been living in my estate rent-free while treating me like a stray dog. You have 30 days. Pack your bags." Chloe completely lost it, screaming profanities and throwing a porcelain teacup at my work truck as we walked back down the driveway. Within 3 hours, my phone turned into a radioactive war zone. The flying monkeys of the extended family descended. Aunt Carol sent a barrage of texts accusing me of being a cold-blooded monster throwing my own flesh and blood into the snow. Cousin Jenny called me a traitor, claiming that blood is thicker than water. But then, my phone rang with a call from Aunt Beatrice. Beatrice was Helena's older sister, a retired hospital head nurse who had spent 40 years taking zero crap from anyone. She and Helena had been feuding for a decade because Beatrice openly despised Marcus's laziness. "Arthur," Beatrice's sharp, raspy voice came through the line, "Carol is having a hysterical breakdown claiming you're turning your parents into refugees. Tell me what's actually happening." I gave her the raw, unedited truth. The 5 years of bills, the $30,000 in structural repairs, the gatekeeping, and the anniversary gala where they locked me out in the freezing rain. There was a long silence on the line. Then Beatrice let out a loud, booming laugh that sounded like rattling gravel. "Jesus Christ, Arthur! Those parasitic fools actually forgot who owns the roof over their heads. This is the best news I've heard all year." "So you don't think I'm being too harsh, Aunt Beatrice?" "Too harsh? You should have thrown that lazy clock watcher and his spoiled brat out years ago," she snapped. "Don't you dare back down. I'll handle Carol and the rest of the idiots in the family chat. You stay strong, kid." Having Beatrice as my shield within the family was a massive relief, but the real battle happened on January 25th at the housing court. My family had hired a bottom-feeder lawyer named Gregory, who tried to file a counter-motion claiming implied family trust and adverse possession, arguing they had lived there for decades. The court hearing was brutal. Judge Vance looked thoroughly exhausted before the case even started. Lucas stood up with crisp military precision, presenting our ironclad evidence, the 2019 cash purchase agreement, 5 years of property taxes paid under my SSN, and a stack of invoices for the slate roof and boiler. When Gregory tried to argue that my family deserved the house because of historical emotional ties, Judge Vance cut him off with a loud slam of his gavel. "Mr. Gregory, emotional ties do not pay property taxes or establish legal titles. The plaintiff is the sole legal owner. The defendants have no lease, no equity, and no legal standing. Motion for counterclaim is denied. Defendants have 30 days to completely vacate the premises." As we exited the courtroom, Chloe was hyperventilating in the hallway, screaming about corrupt judges and family betrayal until courthouse security threatened to cuff her for disrupting the peace. I didn't even look back. By February 1st, reality finally broke through their delusion. The defeat in court had been total and public. Helena called me, her voice shaking with a desperation I had never heard before.
Arthur, honey, we've been looking everywhere. Anything decent in Boston's over $2,400 a month, and they want first, last, and a security deposit. We don't have that kind of money. I put the call on speaker. David was over at my basement apartment helping me organize old tax documents, and he immediately started grinning. Buster was splayed across my lap, watching me with rapt attention. "That sounds like a personal problem, Helena," I said coldly. "Please, Arthur," she begged. "Can we just rent from you? We'll pay you fairly. We just need a chance to prove we can be good tenants." The irony was staggering. After 5 years of living rent-free, after locking me out in a freezing storm, and after trying to fraudulently steal my estate in court, she was now begging to be my tenant. Lucas had actually anticipated this and given me a specific legal strategy to make me look saintly to a judge while setting an unbreakable trap for them. "Fine," I said. "You can rent the detached carriage house, $1,000 a month, first month due February 10th. It's a strict month-to-month lease. If you screw up even once, I terminate it with 30 days' notice." $1,000, Arthur, Marcus cut in, his standard entitlement flaring up. "That's so much money. Couldn't we start at maybe $700 and work up?" "Comparable rentals in this district go for double that, Marcus. Take it or leave it." "Son, we appreciate this," Marcus grumbled. "The court thing got out of hand, but we're family. We can make this work." "This isn't family anymore, Marcus. This is business. You're my tenants now. Act like it." Chloe tried to chime in too. "Bro, what if we did $800? I mean, we just spent all our savings on Gregory's legal fees." "You spent your money on a bottom-feeder lawyer to try and steal my property, not my problem. It's $1,000 or you're out on the street in 3 weeks." They signed the month-to-month lease on February 8th at Lucas's office. The whole process was awkward and tense. Chloe was a complete nightmare during the signing, rolling her eyes and making snide comments about every single clause. "So if we're late on rent, you can just throw us out? That seems incredibly harsh for a brother." "You're not my sister in this room, Chloe. You're a tenant. And yes, if you don't pay rent, you get evicted. That's how renting works." "Whatever, bro. This whole situation is screwed up, and you know it." Lucas sat back, completely enjoying the show. As they walked out, he leaned over to me. "I'll keep the secondary eviction paperwork ready, Arthur. Based on my experience, you'll need it within 30 days. February 10th came and went, no rent payment, exactly like David and Lucas predicted. On February 12th, Helena called with the predictable excuses. "Arthur, honey, we're having a little cash flow issue. Marcus's disability appeal is still pending, and Chloe's interior design client hasn't paid her yet. Can we get it to you by the 15th? David, who was eating pizza, choked laughing. Cash flow issue is fancy talk for "we spent our rent money on a lawyer to steal your house." You agreed to February 10th, Helena. You're already in default. February 15th, still nothing. This time, Marcus called with his standard entitled attitude. "Arthur, we need to talk about this rent situation. $1,000 is completely unrealistic given our current circumstances. Come on, be reasonable. We're family. We can make this work." "We're not family. You made that clear. You're tenants who aren't paying rent." True to his word, Lucas filed the second eviction immediately. The March 1st court hearing was an absolute slaughter. Judge Vance looked visibly disgusted to see the exact same defendants standing in front of him again, especially after they had wasted his time with their fraudulent adverse possession claim weeks prior. "Mr. Morrison, back again with the same family?" Judge Vance sighed. "Yes, Your Honor. They signed a legal lease, then failed to pay the very first month's rent." Chloe couldn't keep her mouth shut, which sealed their fate. She jumped up, shouting, "Your Honor, this is pure retaliation. He's just mad that we tried to fight for our rights." Judge Vance slammed his gavel down so hard it sounded like a gunshot. "Silence, young lady. You tried to steal his property and failed. Then he generously offered you a lease, which you signed and immediately defaulted on. That is not retaliation. That is called consequences. Judgment for the plaintiff. Defendants have exactly 7 days to vacate or face immediate sheriff-assisted removal." 7 days instead of 30. The judge was completely done with their BS, and so was I.
2 weeks after the sheriff finally cleared them out, I was decompressing at my basement apartment when a heavy rhythmic pounding rattled my doorframe. I opened it to find a guy who looked like he spent his weekend snapping telephone poles in half. He was built like a nightclub bouncer, covered in dark sleeve tattoos and looking seriously pissed off. "You Arthur Morrison?" he growled, casting a shadow over my tiny entryway. "Yeah, who's asking?" "Name's Victor. I'm looking for your piece of crap sister, Chloe. She owes me a lot of money, and a little bird told me she might be hiding out with you." I leaned against the doorframe. "Chloe doesn't live here. We haven't been on speaking terms for months." Victor paused, his angry expression shifting into genuine confusion. "That's funny, because when Chloe borrowed $5 grand from me last month, she swore up and down she lived in that massive historic estate across town with her family. She said she ran a high-end interior design firm out of the carriage house. She even showed me pictures of the property, the vintage garage, the manicured driveway, said it was all hers." My blood ran completely cold. "She borrowed $5,000 from you?" "Yeah, said she needed immediate capital for high-end rendering software and premium textile samples for some big corporate clients she was landing. Talked a massive game, showed me a fancy portfolio, promised to pay me back in 30 days, no problem." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Chloe hadn't just been mooching off me, she had been using my property, my garage, and my financial success as a literal prop to scam money from people. She'd taken photos of my hard-won estate to build a fraudulent life of luxury, presenting my sacrifices as her stability. "Well, she lied," I told her flatly. "She was just evicted from that property by court order because she couldn't even pay $1,000 in rent. She's homeless, and her design business is a total phantom." Victor cracked his knuckles, a terrifying metallic sound. "Well, I'm not the type to just write off $5 grand. I've got her signed promissory note, copies of her driver's license, her social security number, everything. If she doesn't pay up by the end of the week, I'm skipping the small claims court and going straight to the police to file criminal charges for grand larceny and fraud." After Victor left, David, who had been sitting on my couch watching the whole exchange, let out a low whistle and shook his head. "Dude, your sister is a next-level con artist. She literally leveraged your house to secure predatory loans. That is wild." Buster let out a low huff from the rug, resting his chin on his paws as if completely exhausted by her stupidity. 2 days later, my phone rang from an unlisted number. I answered it, and Chloe's voice came through, completely stripped of her usual arrogant, high society facade. She sounded frantic, hyperventilating. "Arthur, please, I need you to help me," she sobbed. "There's this terrifying guy named Victor hunting me down, and he's serious about getting his money. He said he knows where I am." "Yeah, he came to my place first, Chloe. You borrowed $5 grand by lying about living in my estate." "Look, I was desperate, okay?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I needed money from my design equipment, and I genuinely thought I could pay him back once I landed a few affluent clients." "Chloe, you've made $200 total in the last 6 months. What universe were you living in where you thought you could magically manifest $5,000? "I don't know. I thought something would work out. But now he's threatening to file criminal charges. Arthur, please, that's fraud. I can't go to jail. Can you just pay him off this once? I'll pay you back, I swear on my life." "You committed fraud using my property as collateral, Chloe. That is your problem, not mine. Enjoy the consequences." I hung up on her mid-scream. I immediately dialed Aunt Beatrice to give her the update. She listened to the whole story without interrupting once. When she finished, a long pause hung over the line before she let out a sharp, booming laugh. "That little leech," Beatrice said with absolute relish, "telling people she's an elite entrepreneur while living rent-free and playing with mood boards. This is perfect, Arthur. It's absolutely perfect. Chloe didn't just throw a tantrum this time. She committed a real crime with real prison time attached to it. This isn't petty family drama anymore. That girl is finally about to learn what a real hammer feels like."
2 months later, the legal hammer Aunt Beatrice promised came down hard. Turns out, Victor wasn't Chloe's only victim.
The police uncovered that she had pulled the exact same scam on 2 other local business owners, accumulating over $12,000 in fraudulent loans by passing off my property as her own collateral. She was arrested at a cheap motel and ultimately pled guilty to multiple counts of grand larceny and theft by deception. The judge, completely disgusted by her exploitation of family assets, handed her 2 years of supervised probation, strict restitution orders, and a felony record that will torpedo any real career she ever hopes to have. Meanwhile, Marcus and Elena's faux aristocratic house of cards collapsed entirely. After being evicted from my carriage house, they tried to couch surf with Uncle Paul. It took exactly 3 weeks for Paul to get sick of Marcus spending 12 hours a day complaining about his nerves while drinking all the premium coffee. When Paul kicked him out, Marcus, incapable of handling reality, tried to break back into Paul's house through a basement window to retrieve his vintage clock tools. Neighbors called the cops, and my dad was hauled off in cuffs for criminal trespassing. Elena, having alienated every single relative with her endless sob stories about her ungrateful, low-vibrational son, finally ran out of options and ended up in a local women's shelter. The contrast between their downfall and my new reality is staggering. With the toxic cloud finally cleared from the property, David officially moved into the estate. He's the perfect tenant, paying $1,200 a month on the first of every month without me ever having to ask. He treats the property with actual respect, helps me maintain the historical structures, and has already upgraded the garage with professional tool racks. At the last extended family gathering, Aunt Beatrice completely took over as the voice of reason, brutally shutting down any distant cousins who tried to romanticize my parents' plight. "Arthur is the only one in this damn family with a spine and a work ethic," she announced to the room, drowning out the murmurs. "Marcus is a deadbeat, Elena is an enabler, and Chloe is a convicted felon. Arthur saved them from bankruptcy, gave them a second chance, and they tried to rob him blind. He didn't ruin that family, they ruined themselves. Now, Sarah and I are engaged. We're planning a small, quiet wedding in the estate's courtyard this autumn, and David is, of course, going to be my best man. During our engagement dinner last week, Beatrice raised a glass of the very wine I'd bought for that disastrous anniversary gala. 'To Arthur,' she said, looking around the table at the people who actually loved and respected me, 'who had the courage to show this family what real success looks like. You built a life with your own 2 hands, and you surrounded yourself with real people.' They had every opportunity to treat me with basic human decency while living in my house for free. Instead, they chose entitlement, fraud, and a pathetic legal war. Now they're scattered across the state, drowning in the consequences of their own toxic actions. I used to think burning bridges was a failure. Now I know that sometimes you have to let the fire light your way forward."